The following is an exclusive production of Minuteman Command. The Flagship Pod with your hosts, ESPN personalities Mike Corey and Rene Ingoglia, is on the air. Brought to you by Todd Fritz Roofing, with insight and info from UMass and MAC insiders. From the Command Studios, here are your hosts, Mike and Rene.
What's up, everybody? And hey, welcome back, brother. This is like a first time you and me in 3 weeks.
I know, a little sunburn, man. I got whacked in St. Martin's. I didn't put a little sunblock on my head, but it was good. Great vacation, rested, rejuvenated, ready to go, full steam ahead, all football.
Now, what was it? What was the ship you were on there?
I was on the Wonder, which I had never been. It's one of their mega ships. I loved it. And so, if you've never cruised, right? Or you have?
No, I have. Yeah, no,
you have. Okay. So, but people either love cruising or they hate cruising, right? It's one or the other. I enjoy it, especially when you have 20-something kids and their friends, because you can all kind of do your own thing on the boat. And those mega ships have so much to do. So I loved it. We cruise Royal Caribbean. Their private island, Coco Cay, awesome.
Yeah.
And then this went to St. Thomas, St. Martin's, nice islands. But I just like the boat and everything there is. So, yep, feel good, ready to go.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great picture of you and your family there too. I know you get the whole dress up. It looked great. It was great.
And my daughter Emily bought all the clothes. She said, I want everyone to wear it, Dad. And I made the comment on social media. It's true. Like, again, 20-something daughters, like they're about to start their own lives, right? Yeah. So those days are limited where you're going to go on a vacation like that, be able to take a photo. And another reason why I like cruises because they take a ton of photos. But yeah, so that was nice.
You got to enjoy it. I mean, and I'll just wrap up on this, is that last one I took was 2011. It was my whole family. And that was the last time I remember, like, where the phone wasn't really working. You couldn't use your phone. Now of course you can use your phone anywhere. So I was like, well, I'm with everybody I need to be with. I wasn't married yet or anything like that. So it's just me, my mom, dad, 2 brothers, sister-in-law. We were all there. And it was the last time where I didn't even touch my phone for like 5-6 days. It was incredible. Like that is a real vacation.
Yeah, you need that unplugging. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, well, welcome back. This is great. We got a lot of good stuff to get to. And we have an awesome guest coming on, so we're going to go right to it, and then we'll just wrap up on the back end. But our great friend, who we got to know way back in the day at UMass, now the voice of the Houston Texans, Marc Vandermeer is with us. What is going on from his studio in Houston at the stadium, right?
Gentlemen, yeah, I'm in NRG Stadium in my office, and I do some podcasting from here. We have radio every night. You see the Texans radio sign. It never ends. The content game continues. There's always something to talk about. Like UMass football. I'm fired up. I'm on a podcast with Rene Ingoglia. This is awesome. Where's Frank Alessio? Let's go. Right. Let's run the rock, baby.
Let's run the ball, baby. The good old days. Mark, tell a lot of people. So 95 to 98, you were the voice of UMass, the Minuteman. How did you get there? Like, give everyone kind of like, how'd you get there? And give everyone kind of, your path.
All right, so this plays into what's going on with UMass football because the MAC is where I was at Central Michigan University. And I really wanted to get back to the East Coast. I'd been away 4 or 5 years and I went to BU. I'm a Boston guy, kind of. I grew up in the New York area, but I consider myself a Boston guy. And I wanted a job. And Mike knows this whole story. I wanted a job. So you send stuff. Back in those days, you sent FedExes with your tape or CD. Yeah, and it was pot shots. You didn't know if there were openings or not. I had like legal pads of all the schools, all the places I'd want to work. UMass was certainly one of them because they were, killing it in basketball all of a sudden. I mean, it went from nothing when I left the New England area in 1990 to what it became. And I really was striking out everywhere. But I had a conversation with the general manager of the radio station, WHMP, Rick Heidemann. And he said, we need somebody to sell the advertising. I'm an advertising sales guy. Mike knows this too, because Mike is too. Okay. And that's how Mike rose to prominence. But I make a long story short, they didn't need a play-by-play guy. But I made a presentation to them. Hey, I'm going to sell all the advertising. I'll run the radio network for the state. I know they were just picking up football because WHMP didn't have it. They had the basketball, but not the football, but they were just getting it. That excited me because as Central Michigan, we were D1. We were in the MAC, right? And basketball at Central Michigan was horrendous. It was awful at the time. We were 3-23 my last year there, but my tape was pretty good. I got the job. It's a great story because I'm doing a baseball game at LSU, Central Michigan in the regionals, right? And we're just getting hammered. But I go out to check my messages on the payphone. Beep, beep, beep. You guys were talking about not having a phone. Back in those days, I didn't have a cell phone. You're punching in your number for the messages, and it's
your voicemail back at the house. Yep.
Yeah. He's like, "Hey, we'd like to talk to you about a job." And I thought, "Oh my gosh, I'm going home. I'm going home. This is Western Massachusetts." And I went to Williston, which is in East Hampton. So I knew the Pioneer Valley. I was excited. I got there, and UMass football was the first thing I did. And we had to set up a broadcast team. A lot of guys wanted to be the color commentator, a lot of good broadcasters, but I wanted a former player or a coach who could help me. Who's out there? Bob Pickett's name came up, but I think he wasn't living in the area. He would have to come in. He wouldn't be able to make every game. I wanted a guy who could make every game. And I found Mike McKevely, quarterback on the 1978 national championship team. He's a lawyer in Central Massachusetts. And Mike's like, "I've never done this before." He's kind of soft-spoken. Yeah. Like, "Mike, you're going to have to rev it up a few here." And Mike, Bob Pickett once said, "Mike McKevely was tougher than a bucket of hammers." He's a tough dude, great quarterback. He turned into a great announcer, wonderful guy. We had a great time doing it for a couple of years. Then I got Jim Bowman the last year or two. But we set up a broadcast team. And we did UMass football, and it was a lot of fun to be a part of it. You were on that team that led the nation in rushing.
Mark, I think I remember joking around because you'd be like, "Touchdown, UMass," and then Mike would come in like, "Yeah, it's a great run." I'm like, "Dude, hey, hold on here," But that was great. And that's where I met Mark because I was a freshman when Mark came in that first year, which is the Final Four year for basketball, football, as we talked about, of course, with you playing, Rene. And that was an incredible year. What a time to come aboard, right?
Well, amazing because basketball had risen to prominence coming off the Elite Eight season. And we put together the crew with me, Jack Lehman, of course, on color, and Tony Barbee was the third guy. Sure. They wanted Tony to be on the broadcast because they basically wanted him to be a grad assistant, but they had no more room for that. So let's put him on the radio broadcast and travel him around. And it all worked out. So I had two guys with me doing basketball. And we all talk about that year. And Mike, I know you're making the doc and everything. That year was just out of this world. I still talk about it with people because it was an amazing schedule, opening with Kentucky at the Palace, the grade 8. And every week, every game was just one blockbuster after another. We played Kentucky, we played Maryland, we played Florida, we played Wake Forest with Tim Duncan. BC at the Fleet Center is probably the game that I'll always take with me. I remember that one. I remember all of them, but I think being a Boston guy, that was the most special to me because that was like, here we have the Red River rivalry with Texas and OU and the Cotton Bowl, and they divided in half, right? The Fleet Center was divided in half, BC, UMass, and BC was not at the level of UMass, but it was good. They had Danya Abrams, Scooney Penn. They were a good team. And that was a war that went down to the wire. And to be courtside for that thing, the electricity in the air. We're on WBZ, this blowtorch out of Boston radio station. And I pinch me. I'm in but it's now the Garden, put that in air quotes. Whatever, it's the Celtics building. And we're playing BC. And Edgar Padilla hits a big shot late. Camby has a big block late to win it. And the hair still stands up on the back of my neck thinking about games like that because we had so many that year. 26-0 at one point, but it wasn't like they were all blowouts. There were a lot of close games, a lot of really hotly contested affairs that were fun to do.
Is that your most memorable game, football and basketball, your time at UMass?
Well, I categorize them differently because.
Okay, let's hear it.
All right, so football. Look, 98, national championship, right?
Yep.
Now. 98, it's funny because one of the most memorable games of 98 for me is actually a loss. It's the opener at Delaware, where Mike would eventually be voice of the Blue Hens. But we're coming off a bad season. We're coming off 2-9 in Mike Hodges last year. And I got more on Mike later. But that was an unfortunate year, obviously not doing well, 2-9. But Marcel Shipp is on that team. Mm-hmm. Mike got a lot of the guys who contributed to that championship. Mike was a good recruiter. And Mike was a good coach. And we can talk more about him later. But that was a bad year, and that was it. So Whipple comes in. Whipple blew us all away because opening press conference, we're a sleeping giant. We're going to win the national championship. And we're like, does he know where he's coaching? I mean, come on. And he's talking 1AA national championship. But he says this in the press conference. And we're like, okay. But the opener at Delaware, he goes out and gets Todd Bankhead at quarterback, Jimmy Moore receiver, Adrian Zullo from South Florida. He loads up at key positions in addition to some of the seedlings that were already there. But the offensive line, I believe, was pretty much Mike's offensive line. But now opening night against Delaware, it's a night game. And so it's great. And Delaware has a great atmosphere for 1AA or for anywhere, really. But here comes the rush. But all the O-linemen, they pick up everybody. Bankhead has time to throw, and we're dealing. And that was the magic of Whipple's offenses. He could score points. And that night, it was a close game. We lost, but scored a bunch of points. I don't remember the final, but I just remember this team is going places because we can compete now at this level. We got a quarterback. They got Bankhead from wherever in California. I don't even remember, but that was an amazing night, and it set the tone for that entire year.
Whipple did back then what everyone. So the transfer portal now, right? You got everyone going crazy. He did that with JUCOs. He brought in, to your point, those were JUCOs he brought in. He added pieces to an already really good roster that, to your point, just didn't gel that year before. And to go from what they did in 97 to win the national championship in 98 is actually incredible. And I don't think it gets enough credit.
It's absolutely amazing. We were a 12 seed. So it's a 16-team field at the time, right?
Yeah.
12 seed. And you got to go on the road. McNeese State, the opening game of the postseason, it's McNeese State. You are in an exotic land, Louisiana. And I remember that was actually one of my first times I've ever been in Houston because I landed in Houston. We were staying in Beaumont. We stayed in Beaumont and then took the trip to Lake Charles to play McNeese and won it on a missed McNeese field goal late. And I just thought, this doesn't happen. You can't win this thing. And then they go back and beat Northwestern State a couple of weeks later and then eventually win the championship. I just thought, he was amazing. I know the second time around didn't go as well, but if you look, and I'm sure you guys have talked about it, he's done better than anybody else because he to win four games, and it's not just the wins, it's the losses. He was able to score points. He scored a bunch of points in those losses, and because he can coach offense. Obviously, they couldn't get the defense together, and you guys know more about the inner workings of those teams than I do. But I'll always have mad respect for Whip and what he was able to do at UMass. And I think, obviously you win a championship. It's just incredible.
It's a fun time period. I mean, like you said, we came in watching Rene and Frank Alessio and those guys. And Mark, sometimes I think and I see that team and those players and like the build and who they were and how they looked. It's like, I wonder what they would do today. Like if we took that team, I mean, it's interesting.
How about today? All right. So you win the championship in 98, Bankhead would be out of there. Right, because he'd get NIL money galore. He'd go to some
Ship would have been gone. So many of them would have been
Ship
gone.
Would have been out of there. I mean, Kerry Taylor would have been out of there probably.
Yep.
I mean, even a guy like Matt Jordan, you wouldn't have been able to keep probably.
That's right. So, Matt was a true freshman when I was a senior. I remember Matty, Mr. Football in New Hampshire.
Ron Brockington. Wasn't he a transfer from Syracuse or something?
He was. So when I played with Ron, Ron's like the head scout now for the Miami Dolphins. So you may run into him, Mark, in your travels.
Oh, I need to see him. Now, a lot of these guys I didn't really know well because I didn't go to practice, admittedly, UMass football practice. My job at WHMP as the network director was so freaking busy. I was busy as all get out, selling advertising for the network and putting UMass football and basketball all over the state. Now, football didn't have as many affiliates, but this is like my personal moment that I will never forget. This is just like a me moment. I'm in the booth. We're playing Richmond in 97. And Jim Reed comes into my booth before the game. And Jim Reed said, "I'm looking for Marc Vandermeer." I'm like, "Yeah, you found him." He's like, "Hey, I saw that you put UMass football on the radio in Boston this year." I'm like, "Yeah." He said, "That's incredible. We've never had it," because I used to coach at UMass, and we've never had that. That's amazing. He was so happy with that. and wanted to acknowledge me for that. And that's one of the greatest moments of my career as far as the business side of things, that a head coach before the freaking game. You can't talk to a football head coach before the game.
Wow.
He came to see me. Now, he's probably doing something else in the press box, but that was on his list. So that was really a special moment for me. We were on 14:30 a.m., which daytime signal was really strong. I think it was only a daytimer, Mike, but during the day, and that most UMass games were during the day, we had great coverage of UMass football in Boston. And Bob Goodhue of the Alumni Association, John Feudo, they helped me bankroll that because we had to buy the time to get it out. So we had lots of deals going on left and right, and I was wheeling and dealing with that network because I wanted UMass. Internet listening was not a thing then.
No,
in the late 90s. It was just coming around on AudioNet, and eventually, Mark Cuban buys and sells that company. But we had to be on radio stations. I would literally drive around Route 128 at night sometimes and just try to tune in signals. What can I get here in the Boston area? We're on WATD in Marshfield. We're on some BPS 890 AM, a weird sports station that probably is gone now, I'm sure. We were on BZ for basketball, but only about 10, 12 games and some postseason. They couldn't do the whole schedule. So I was really busy trying to get clearance for that. I know a lot of people listening to this podcast and watching it don't want to hear that stuff, but that was a big part of it. We were trying to get good coverage for our team, and such a special time.
You did. You built that whole network. Like, that's what it was. It was like multiple stations. Like, how many total did you end up having at one point? Like maybe 25 stations or something?
Yeah, for basketball, it was about 25. And it was wild, and Jim Campbell back at the station would have to coordinate all that, and we'd have to distribute it. And we did. And
breaks,
phones feeds, and it was crazy.
Local breaks and all this stuff. Like, I'll add to your quick story there on the note about Reed coming up to the booth. Like, I remember writing an article in the Collegian one time about the UMass football team, where it was a big win, a great win, and I felt like everybody contributed. And I started off with like team, and I felt like the definition of team, and I wrote about that and how they all came together. He wrote me Mike Hodges wrote me a handwritten letter and sent it to the radio station WMUA to say thank you for writing about this, and I shared this article with the team, and like, this is great. This is what you. And then when I went to the press conference, I think earlier the week before the next game, I think I asked some question. He was like, well, Mike, you wrote about it. You talked about this and blah, blah, blah. It's like they gave a lot of nice comments and credit. I always remember that.
Oh, well, look, Mike Hodges. I mean, can we talk about this guy?
Yeah.
He was so wonderful to be around. The first game I ever did was Richmond 95. That was the opener. We lost at McGurk. Mm-hmm. And the coaches show, for some reason, we had the presence of mind to put the coaches show on the day after the game, like an hour-long show in what's the big building with there's a sports bar, a restaurant, and I forget, it's on campus.
Rafters?
It's not Rafters, but I think it's a university-owned deal. But anyway, he came up to do the coaches show, and that was his obligation. I'll put that in air quotes. He fulfilled it. And that was not an easy one to do because, whatever history between him and Jim Reed, and Reed was coaching Richmond and all that stuff. Beating Richmond on the road with Hodges, and I think Brockington might have scored the game-winning run in overtime. But I'm a little foggy on that. But all I remember was coming back on the plane, and UMass plane ride. We had like 3 of them while I was there. But Hodges was in the front seat and just smiling and with his eyes closed. I knew that one was special to him. Beating Reed in his place in Richmond, that was a big one. So, and we had another one to cap 96. Jeff Smith, late touchdown against UConn, which, guys, I mean, UConn to me, people bring up UConn. UConn to me is the evil empire. Like now with the Texans, it's the Colts because they haunted us for so long with Peyton Manning and then Andrew Luck. Yep. UConn has always been the enemy because I was at BU. They were a rival in the Yankee Conference. UMass, obviously, huge rival, and just bitterness. And then I went to the Hurricanes, another rivalry in basketball. And I never was part of a UMass basketball team that beat UConn, but UMass football beat UConn in 96 in that like really great thriller. And Jeff Smith was a pretty good quarterback. They started to throw it a little bit 96, 97, and it was fun to watch.
I got to ask you this, Mark, because I agree with you. Like a lot of people don't realize too, the proximity to UMass and UConn, what's it, an hour, probably an hour drive. And I just think, and they're going to play, they don't play this season, but they're going to be back on the schedule because we talked to Ryan Bamford, but I would love And I don't think the MAC will do it because they, these conferences now,
Yeah,
they want all sports. But I would love somehow for UConn to go to the MAC for football only. I think if you're the MAC, it's a home run because you get a built-in rivalry with UMass and UConn. You bring more to the Northeast, which helps Buffalo out. I just think that would be a slam dunk. I don't think it's going to happen, but I would love to see it. What are your thoughts?
well, the MAC in general, when this first came up, and I know it didn't last because they wouldn't join in all.
They wanted all sports,
Right.
correct?
Right.
Yeah, they were in before.
How are they traveling football? Are they going to fly to like Miami of Ohio? Are they going to fly to Central Michigan? That's a long drive. I've done that drive. That's
Yeah.
a drive.
No, you got to fly.
Job.
No, they're going to fly. They have the money invested now. They're flying.
They got the money to do it. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's good right there. I didn't like it when they were playing in Foxborough because I thought if you play Kent or Akron in Foxborough, nobody cares in Boston.
Yeah.
They'd rather probably watch you play UNH if or Maine.
Yeah.
They don't care about the opponent unless it's a big time opponent. And there's no big time opponent in the MAC. They're good teams with great within the MAC brands, but it doesn't appeal to the people in Foxborough. At McGurk, it makes more sense. And I think UMass being an independent all these years, you have to be in a league. We all agree on that. So this is a much better shot to be successful. Now, I don't know how you do it in the NIL world because I know Tony Barbee, he's not at Central Michigan anymore as the head coach, but he had that good year, 23-24. And, it wasn't a championship year, but it was a winning season. And, everybody left.
Yeah.
You have no money. You don't have money. And I don't know how you do it these days. And I know they're working with the salary cap and all that. You guys must talk about this ad nauseum, so I know the listeners.
Well, I mean, the only thing you can do, and like you said, we have talked about it. You have to be able to compete within your conference, within your group of six, whatever you want to call it, because they're all in the same boat. Because if any of them have an outstanding player, the power programs have the money to come pluck them, and so you have to be able to navigate that world within your conference. And so it's going to be interesting this year, but. With that said, a UMass this year, Mark, can do what they did from 97 to 98. Maybe not win a national championship, but they can turn their program around and compete for the MAC championship. I am convinced of that because of the way the system is now.
Yeah, from afar, it just felt to me like the formula or the model was let's go get gigantic paychecks and get our butts kicked in these gigantic buildings, which is not, pleasant. All right, the money's good, but what are we really doing here? I know I'm old school guy. I'm sometimes get off my lawn guy. I miss the Yankee Conference. I think Maine, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, BU. All right, so this is another one. Nickerson Field to me is the place, right? Because I went to school there, and that's literally where I learned about football. In my dorm, overlooking the field, watching the Terriers play. And they had good players. They had Paul Lewis, who was a good back, and Greg Drew. And I got there the year after Jim Jensen left and went to the Dolphins. But they had a quarterback, Jim English. They had some good teams there, right? But they dropped football. 97, playing UMass, last game of the year. It's the last ever football game at Nickerson Field. And I'm calling it for UMass. And we're having a bad year. But I'm like, this is weird. This emotionally for me, that was weird. Now, BU blew out UMass that day. They were having a bad year too, but Roger Harriet I think it was the first play from scrimmage, goes 65 yards, touchdown, game over already. Fans are going nuts because whoever was there because it's BU's last game. But that was emotional for me. I wasn't happy about BU winning so much, but just being in Nickerson Field for the last football game ever played there. But they dropped football. Northeastern drops football. And Mike, I don't know if you've done a game at Northeastern. I know Rene there. That is the worst place. I mean, we think about William and Mary being a weird place to call a game.
Yeah.
Northeastern was crazy.
You're like in that lady's backyard, you know what I mean? And then there's like two buildings you couldn't even dress in the same building.
They should have used Foxborough. And they've used Foxborough a few times, but Foxborough should have been their permanent stadium.
Mark,
use the Manning Bowl.
Anything.
Mark,
like
we had to walk up the steps, right, to McGurk to get to the press box. And then when I got to Delaware, I had to do the same thing, and it was even higher, So when we did games at Northeastern, there's like 6 rows, and then there's the press box. So I remember just like running up the steps and being like, it's 6
you already
off the field.
No microphones needed at Northeastern. I mean, your parents, you heard everything on the sideline. So
it was like an RV. This is my memory of it. It's probably or some kind of modular home that you're in. Now there were restrictions in the neighborhood. You couldn't have the edifice more than one story or 1.5. So it was so low to the ground. If they were at the far side, inside the 20-yard line, like outside the hashes, like with any kind of action, they could be, you could say 14-yard line, they might be on the 4. You could literally not tell. You needed somebody to spot it. We didn't have that. We didn't have a sideline reporter. You know how I did sideline post-game interviews at UMass? I would send Ben Shapiro, our stat guy, down to go talk to Hodges, ask him 3 questions, and he could handle that. On a tape recorder, bring it back up. I'd rewind it during the break, play it back. I had a post-game interview. But you know what? The listeners didn't know, and it sounded fine. It was plausibly live. I didn't say it was live. I said, and here's Mike Hodges right after the game, and run it.
Mark, did you ever do a game at William & Mary? Old school William & Mary?
Yes, William & Mary is terrible because you have this overhang. So when the ball is punted, it's a rumor where the ball is. I don't know. It's going to come down eventually.
You cannot see on the right side inside the 20-yard line. You literally couldn't. You had to dock down so you could see the field. So you couldn't see the goalpost. Delaware's got a game-winning field goal at William & Mary. I'm doing the game, and I'm like, I told my sideline guy who's in our ear, right? He's in spotter in our ear, and then if we want to put him on, we put him on. So I was like, Matt, you're going to have to tell me what happens on this kick. I mean, I can't fucking see it. Like, this is a game-winning kick. It goes up. I'm like, and he kicks it, and it's up. And then Matt goes in my ear, he's like, he missed it. And I'm like, he missed it. Tell me. It's like, oh, it's crazy. It was crazy.
Mark, I got a funny story about Yankee Conference since you brought it up, and Mike knows this. So I don't know, Mike. It's funny. It's like 6-7 years ago, though, when me and Mike were together full time with an ESPN package. We had we did a Remy. So you have a remote producer that travels with you. Tim McDermott, his name is, good friend of ours. We still talk to Timmy all the time.
T-Mac,
and he goes, I bet you cannot, because what my thing is when I go into coaches meetings, you do it. You look for similarities or connections. And to me, it was always the Yankee Conference. So I started doing that. And this assistant coach played in the Yankee Conference, or maybe his dad coached in the Yankee Conference. And so Tim goes, I bet you cannot connect the Yankee Conference every single week. I go, okay, bet taken. And that year, I think that was the 2019 season, I connected somebody, a coach, somebody with the Yankee Conference. That's how, strong of a conference it was, and the coaching lines and players. It was pretty fun.
He did.
One of our general managers who also had other positions in our front office here, Brian Gain, I think he's with Buffalo now as their second in command. He went to Maine. He played for Maine. And our director of security, Brett Nakara, also played for Maine. And we were both here for about 6-7 years before we realized that he returned a kickoff for a touchdown at McGurk. And I called the play, right? I couldn't find it because I have tapes, but I don't have every UMass football game I've ever done.
No YouTube back then.
Yeah, no YouTube. So I know I called him, and I probably didn't call it, enthusiastically because it's the opponent. Like, it's a kickoff return for a touchdown. But he did it, and it's just like the connections are everywhere, especially if you go to a lot of guys have UNH connections for some reason. UNH is a big one. Yep. And Maine too. But you could always, hey, Chris Palmer was the head coach of BU. He was our very first offensive coordinator, and one of his quarterbacks, Jim Schumann, lives here in Houston. I met up with him when the franchise got started. And it's just, they're everywhere. Football is always 2 degrees of separation.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things to do every week we play in the NFL is look at the assistant coach's roster of the opponent. It's like the Federal Witness Protection Program. You see guys and they're like, oh, wait, Dick McPherson, he's still here. Coach McPherson, we love you. But you know what I'm saying? Or Paul Pasqualoni, I should say, not McPherson.
Paul's the one. Yeah.
Paul's the one. And Paul was here for a while, too. But there are guys like that everywhere. I remember that we were playing the Jags in the early going when I first got here. Ken Anderson was their quarterback's coach. Ken Anderson, I love Ken Anderson, played for the Bengals. So there are connections all over the place. You just have to look within and you'll find them.
Mark, the only other thing, too, is that you realize how long we've been doing this and maybe how old we're getting is that when you start to see the juniors, on some of those players, it's like, wait a minute. his son is now a player here. Like I do this in college. You're probably going to get it when it comes to the NFL. And I'm thinking to myself, well,
his son's a coach now.
Yes, as a coach. I'm like, I guess he was 22 when he had his kid, and now he's 40, and that's been 20 years. Like you don't even.
We've got Mario Edwards Jr. on our team. His dad played against us in 2002. All right. So for the Cowboys, I mean, we got stuff like that all the time. You see like Asante Samuel, Patrick Surtain, they're all their sons. And then I see Mercedes Lewis, and I'm thinking, is that his son? No, it's still Mercedes Lewis. He's still in the league. It's like one of those weird ones. Like, oh, well, it's still him. It's okay. I'm not as old as I thought. Okay, good.
That's awesome. Hey, did you, what were you, like in terms of the UMass when you were there, like, was there any kind of like unsung hero, whether in program history that you've had?
Well,
like,
there are a lot of athletes I'll always remember, like Doug Clark. Okay. Doug Clark was on the football team, baseball player. As he started to have success with baseball, I just thought, hey, man, I did some Doug Clark games, and baseball, we had a phenomenal time going to Florida and making it. Now, we needed to beat Florida twice to make it to the World Series, but we had that chance because we beat Central Florida and South Florida back to back on the Saturday before. And I'll never forget that. I'll never forget doing that. I'll never forget doing Fenway Park Bean Pot. I don't know if they still have the baseball bean pot at Fenway. Nobody would go, but it was family and friends basically. But you're at Fenway doing a game, and I called the no-hitter there for UMass. So that was awesome. So there are a lot of moments like that and players that I'll always remember. But I think Hodges is, as far as the football program, is kind of unsung because, Mike didn't win the league, but Mike had winning seasons. Mike knew how to pull the rabbit out of the hat. Like I said, he recruited a lot of the guys who contributed to the championship team in '98. And he stayed around and was a tremendous ambassador for the program and still is. I still see him on Facebook and everything. And Coach is just one of those wonderful people that you feel fortunate you were around.
I should probably do a show on this because obviously I was there for it all. Coach Reed was the one that gave me the scholarship and brought me there. I was there when he resigned. I know exactly what was going on in the athletic department. Coach Reed did the right thing by resigning, but Coach Hodges, and obviously, it's tough there, right? When one of your assistants ends up taking the job. But I've said this before. Coach Hodges kept that program together. A lot of people don't realize this because basketball was stepping up a notch. There was people in that athletic department. They wanted to drop football back then, or they wanted to go to I don't know if you remember this, Mark, before you got there, but they were talking about like a 1 AAA and like scholarship. There's a lot of crap going on, and Coach Hodges was able to step up and keep it together. And I know for a fact now, Coach Hodges and Coach Reed, their relationship's back together good, which I love. But I could do a whole podcast on that.
We should grab them on. We should bring them on one time.
Yeah, and we could probably bring them on as well. Absolutely. I think Coach Hodges turns 80 this year. His daughter had reached out to me. That would be a good podcast.
No doubt. And Coach Reed has stories for days. Everywhere he's been, everything he's done.
We just saw him. He's still up there.
He turned Richmond around, and I remember what he said. He's like, we took everybody who could run, and we put him on defense. That's how we did it.
Mark, I got to tell this real quick because I just saw him at the media day or the spring game of UMass football, and I said, Jim, I always remember this story because I was going around the league and interviewing the coaches for Tubby Raymond, because he was doing 300th win the year I was doing it, like my third year on the job. And Jim Reed goes, I got this. He goes, great story. He goes, we can never beat Tubby. We always lose every year. Then one year we finally beat him. And I run over there. He's walking there with a board ground. He goes, I run over there. I blow by his handshake. I pick him up. I spin him around. I give him a big giant kiss. And he's like, Coach, he's like, I'm sorry. He's like, with the respect and esteem I hold for you. He's like, this win. He's like, I just feel like we've beaten the best coach in America. And Tubby goes, in some sick way, I'm kind of happy for you right now. He's like, a couple years later, he's like, we beat him again. And it was like, and I was a little more calm this time. So he's like, I go to walk over and I put out my hand. Tubby comes right over here and he goes, don't you dare kiss me, you son of a bitch. He tells such a great story with it. It's
that's good.
He is hilarious. I mean,
see, I think one AA football. I once asked the athletic director of the Southern Conference here in Texas, when they were here in Texas, why do all these teams want to move up? Why does everybody want to move up? Like we were talking about Yankee Conference, like wasn't it kind of good enough in a way, you know? And I remember Holy Cross and Gordy Lockbaum and them coming to BU and how wonderful that game was, and everything was. BU held maybe 4,500 people, but you fill that place up, it's the loudest place in America, you know, if everybody's into the game. But he said, this athletic director said, Tom Burnett, he said, they all want a seat at the table. They all want a seat at the big table, you know, because you can't tell me that a lot of the teams and in this part of the country too, Sam Houston State, Mike, I know, you know, Casey and all that, you know, Sam Houston State, and I know he's not there anymore, but Sam Houston State moving up, Texas State moved up years ago, and all these teams moving up and moving around. You can't tell me they're making more money. They might be making more money, but they're spending way more money, you know? And so you wonder, like, what's the purity of college sports? And I guess, you know, we can talk about that for days. It's still the most fun. Football is the best game. College on Saturday, there's nothing like it. I mean, I love the NFL because every week, you know, when I was at Miami, we'd have 3 or 4 games a year that were really tough. You know, you play Florida State, you know, you're facing some real tough players. In the NFL, every week, there are fire-breathing dragons across the line of scrimmage. The defensive ends will kill you. You know, I don't care if the team's, you know, over. You are in for a big challenge every single week, and I love that about it. But, you know, I love it all. I mean, the game of football, there's nothing like it.
It's I got to bring up this story as Mark made me think about. So in 2009, Mark, when I got into broadcasting, when I did radio for the UMass Sports Network, they played Holy Cross. And Gordy Lockbaum, I always looked up to Gordy Lockbaum. I mean, he was a stud, right? I mean, third in the Heisman from Holy Cross, and he was the analyst for Holy Cross Radio. So we're in the press box, and I'm like, you know, I meet him, and he knows who I am, and we talk, and I'm just like awestruck because it's Gordy Lockbaum, and I'm like, it's Gordy, and like no one knew who Gordy Lockbaum was, and it was blowing my mind. He's eating clam chowder. He spills it on his shirt. It's play by play. He's like, Gordy, what are you doing? I'm like, it's radio. It doesn't matter. You know, that's the one great thing about radio. You can eat. You don't have to worry about it. At ESPN TV, we got to be a little more careful. But yeah, so I met Gordy Lockbaum in 2009. Just one of the greatest college football players ever to play the game, even to this day, by far.
Right. I mean, and Holy Cross, what a history. I only did one game there, and we won it.
Historic
field. I mean, and reading about it at the time, I was blown away of all the history that they've had. And then you look at the basketball program; it's ridiculous, you know, with Cousy and Heinsohn and everything like that. So, no, there's so much history. There's so much rich New England history there.
And we talked about on I think the pod last week. There was a 26-year span from like the 60s into the 80s where UMass, BC, and Holy Cross, they all played each other in football every year. So
dude, that's crazy.
On top of the Yankee Conference, New England football was fun.
BC played Holy Cross every year, and when I went to BU, like I'm Doug Flutie's age, right? So I was a Flutie fan, even though I'm going to BU. And my friends were giving me a hard time, and I said, "Listen, we don't compete with them in football. This isn't hockey." Okay, it's not even basketball where, you know, with BU, we were okay. We had Patino coaching and Mike Jarvis coaching, and, you know, we had some moments, but this is football. We don't even measure up slightly. They're not even on the schedule ever. I can root for Doug Flutie, who really is my favorite college football of all time, next to you, Rene, of course. But Flutie to me, there's just nothing like that. You know, the magic that took place in New England during that time, and BC became a relevant team. And I liken it. It's a different thing, but UMass basketball was kind of like Flutie, you know, did for Boston sports what Flutie did for football. Because UMass basketball in the mid-'90s, you think about the Celtics were terrible. ML Carr coaching, they were going through a bad time. The Bruins, I think, were going through a bad time. The Red Sox were the Red Sox, but so what? They weren't playing. This is winter. And the Patriots, they had Parcells, so they were starting to come along, but they weren't what they would become. Yeah. So UMass on the cover of the Boston Globe sports section every single day of the winter was phenomenal. You know, that big, that kind of big time program that helped me get the Miami job too. The fact that I was involved, you know, with that kind of, you know, I really wasn't involved with the rise. I was involved with their best year ever. And then it started to go down, you know, Bruiser And I think Bruiser gets a bad rap sometimes because he lost 3/5 of his starting lineup and had a murderer's row schedule in 96, 97. I mean, what are you going to do? And he ends up making the playoffs. I mean, made the NCAA tournament anyway, but 2 years in a row. But anyway, I mean, it was a wonderful time to be there, no question.
Yeah, you had it was an awesome run. I mean, before we go, because people need to know this, it's like the reason why you got my career started. And Mark, I know you know, and I tell you this because I appreciate it. Mark really helped me get my first job at Delaware. I mean, all that stuff you talked about in the beginning about sending FedEx tapes and all these little attention getter items. I mean, that's what he told me to do. And I did the same thing. I created a list. I got the Delaware. Had a position open. He knew the people because they worked at the same company as his did. Gave me all the names. I sent all my tapes and all my stuff down there and got the job. So I've always been forever grateful to you for that. It was amazing.
You could put the royalty check in the mail, Mike. Mark will take it in Houston. I'll take an agency.
I used to try to sell advertising on the network, and they'd be like, I went to the Budweiser distributorship, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, we already talked to the UMass basketball guy." I'm like, what? Who? What? This guy. From where? From the radio station that carries UMass basketball. I'm like, let me see the proposal. And they show it to me. And his rates are like 1/20th of our rates because it's on the student station.
Yeah.
I said, this is the student station. He's like, yeah, but it's UMass basketball. I'm like, what are you doing? Corey, you're killing me. Undercutting me.
Mike was undercutting you.
I did. I remember the story because it was Williams Distributed, right? And they had the Budweiser beer. Now at the student radio, you couldn't do advertising. You can only do underwriting, which means you couldn't say like call to action. So I was like, hey, we'll just say, drink responsibly and all this stuff, and we'll get the liquor people on. And
I think you called them spots, though. You're still calling them spots.
Like spots. So we did this after Mark goes over there and he uncovers the situation. He calls me. He's like, listen, stay away from Williams Distributing. Like, I definitely remember that.
Oh man,
it was great. No,
for you. That's the way to do it. That's guerrilla warfare right there, and advertising sales. It was a beautiful thing.
It was awesome.
Amazing.
Look, you've been running the show ever since the Texans became a team, right? This is your 24th year. Am I right?
Yeah, I'm really blessed because the franchise starts and I'm the first guy in. So I'm the only guy in the NFL to call every game his team has played. So that's a wonderful honor, and it's a real, like I said, it's a real treat every single week. You guys know there's nothing like game day,
No.
And I don't care what you're doing. If I was still at Central Michigan, I'd feel the same way.
Yeah.
If I was still doing high school, I think I'd feel the same way. There's nothing like being at the game, broadcasting the game, especially when people care. It is an amazing, exhilarating feeling, and you're blessed to be able to be in that position, and I'll never take it lightly. We have a wonderful group that we work with. Andre Ware is my color commentator, and we got John Harris on the sideline, who's like a football AI. I mean, he's just unbelievable with his knowledge, and we have a lot of fun together. We have great chemistry, and you guys know it's like you're being in the foxhole together, and you have that bonding that takes place. So I'm really fortunate.
We talk about it all the time, man. It's awesome having you on. Great catching up, and we'll do this again soon. Hope you have a great season. I think it should be a lot of fun. Camp starts.
Go UMass. See you at Rafters. Let's go.
Yeah, if it was still there.
It's still
Thanks,
there.
Mark.
No, it's not. If it was.
If it was still there, there's another place. I'm sure.
There's a couple other places there now.
All right, boys. Thanks a lot for having me.
Thanks, Mark.
Have a great one, Mark. Thanks, man.
All right.
Appreciate it. Oh man, I tell you, going back in some of these stories and the times that we were there. I mean, I think everybody watching, listening, probably reminiscing, hearing some of those things too. Rene, it's pretty cool. I mean, it really is.
You know how many UMass fans are going to watch or listen to this pod and say, I didn't even know who Marc Vandermeer was, and he was there for a big stretch. Obviously, UMass football national championship, the end of the greatness of not the end of the greatness, but where the Calipari years was there. And then he went on, and he's still having a great career as the voice of the Houston Texans. So it was awesome having Mark on the pod today. And then we'll close it out with a couple things. I did the math: 45 days until Temple. So it is like right here. I know we'll have our show next week, but I know coming up you have Conference USA Media Days. Yep. American Athletic Conference Media Days. And because of that, I know there's a golf tournament coming up, and that coincides with those media days. So obviously we can't do the golf tournament, but so it's busy time now for us.
It is. And we got that going next week. We'll recap it. We'll do it again. And before we close it out, huge thoughts, prayers, and condolences to our friend on Minuteman Command, David Bowden, and his friend, Rene Horrible, down in Texas.
Yeah, Wade Lytle. And let me back up too. So David Bowden, he's one of the creators of Minuteman Command. He's the one that actually reached out to me. We had a mutual friend telling me about Minuteman Command and what they were doing, and Christian was doing, and Tommy were doing. And he said, hey, we'd love to bring you aboard to do a podcast. And I said, absolutely. I would love to give back to the university. And that's when I reached out to you. I said, I got the perfect partner, Mike Corey, UMass alum, ESPN guy. David also is an assistant coach at Trinity University in San Antonio, Texas. Wade Lytle is the offensive coordinator, and they share an office together. They're tight friends and colleagues. Wade's 8-year-old daughter, Kellyanne Lytle, lost her life in the floods at Camp Mystic that we've all seen about. So it's just devastating. So, if you pray, please give a prayer out to the family. If you're not the praying type, just give some good thoughts. I couldn't imagine, you have a young daughter, Mike. My daughters are older now. I just couldn't imagine that happening. So we're praying for the Lytle family, praying for David and everybody involved in those horrific floods and all the lives lost and all the families' lives that are changed forever.
Yeah. Thoughts and prayers out to all you guys. We're thinking of you. So have a good week. We will do this again next week. And I can't believe we're already in the middle of July, but we're getting close, really. So awesome catching up with you, and great show this week. And thanks again to Marc Vandermeer for being with us. And we will see you next week.
See you.